Yes, he had lost a great deal of his mind, but he always loved physics despite his profession in the mail delivery industry.
Next film, Uncle Albert, one of those films that, well, I'm assuming everybody in the audience has gone to a funeral. I'm assuming most of us have gone to a funeral where we don't really care about the person who passed away, and it's sort of like that expectation of feeling sad about something, and it's sort of making a comic point of view of this situation.
It is interesting that people grieve in different ways, so it was funny that you had such a continuum of somebody who was overdramatic with it, somebody who just didn't show it on the outside, and she had to hurt herself to look like she was hurting. It was very comical how the human condition is so different when it comes to grieving.
It's also a film a take on like how many of us are just selfish, and we're just sort of like kind of care about what we feel, and she's really one. In an ironic way, she's the one who's really feeling the most because she's trying to figure out what she's really feeling where everybody else is going through a conventional route. So there's a little bit of depth to this film, this black comedy.
I really enjoyed this movie. I mean, all the movies got better as time went on. And this was really good. It was funny. It was entertaining. I liked all the characters. I liked the scrolls she had with trying to show emotion at a funeral. Sometimes when you're at a funeral, you just, I guess you feel it on the inside, but you don't really show it on the outside. So sometimes you don't have to show it on the outside to really feel for the loss. And that was just proof of it. She went through a lot to show everybody how she felt.
I think it was more that she didn't feel anything, and so she felt the pressure to be accepted in the funeral and be like, oh, I'm one of you, I feel what you feel, but she really didn't. And I think there are people, like you said, who do go through that, where they want to be accepted at the funeral and be looked at as normal and like, oh, you should be crying or you should be feeling this, but she just didn't, and no one seemed to understand that.
Yeah, I think it was fantastic. I don't know if the filmmaker's here, but what I loved about it, I love the cinematography, I love the moments, I like the stillness, I liked the way it was framed. I thought the actual cinematography was telling a story. The camera was a point of view, and it was more about the things that weren't said that I think were really profound and really beautiful. And I think it was the beautiful close-ups of the actress's face and a lot of the racking focus between little details of her hands and then going to someone else's face. I think I won't speak for the filmmaker, but that's what it looked like to me, that she was telling a story in and out of the story, and it was nothing to do with what was said, which I think worked really well, and I was impressed by it.
Of course, anybody who's willing to come and listen to my poetry and grieve my uncle everybody's bodies.
So true.
I love this film because it touched a lot on like one of the main problems with society nowadays, and that's peer pressure. Peer pressure to feel accepted. Like, I got that indirect message from it that a lot of people would go to the extreme. Like, we saw her doing that thing to her nails and just burning herself with a cigarette just so she was able to cry. Like, and to me, that sends the strongest of messages to community, to society, to see like, hey, this is a problem if we don't talk things through. Like, people can go to the extreme, and sometimes, I don't want to get too deep, but it ends up in suicide.
You're talking about acceptance, so here's a film about a girl trying to be accepted at the funeral, and of course that's the last stage of the fourth stage of grief is acceptance.
I thought it was interesting. I think maybe the third to last person just said about the not feeling anything but still feeling the pressure. Because I've been in a situation where, like, my ex, her sister was in the hospital and I barely knew her. And I feel bad for the family, but it's like, everybody's in there, she was in there all day, we're there all day. And at a certain point I started reading, I felt the energy of everybody looking at me like I'm supposed to be crying and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know her that way. I don't feel the same way that you guys do. And I felt that pressure. I stood my ground. I'm not gonna fake it. I mean, I felt bad for her, but it's like that there is a peer pressure. It's like, I don't even think because they're being emotional, they weren't even thinking clearly. Like, this guy has met her like twice, I don't feel, and so that there is that pressure. I can imagine it's the same thing at a funeral. They weren't showing I guess she felt a certain way, but there's actually an energy that others can push on you because they expect you to grieve the same way they are. You may not show it the same way, or you may not even feel the same way about that person. So I thought that was interesting that she felt the need to go to those extremes. That's what it felt like they're trying to get me to do. Like, oh, the right thing to do is to act like I feel a certain way. I didn't do that, but so I thought that was interesting. I was able to.
I think that it's interesting what he said about expectations, because everyone at that funeral had an expectation. You had the grieving widow, you had the distraught nephew, I believe it was, and then the friend who didn't know the guy at all, who was just there because I think that she felt that she was expected to show up for her friend, and then the sole girl who didn't know what to do because she had everyone else was playing their role, their expected role at a funeral, and she didn't feel that. And so she went to all these extremes to try and do all these different things. She tried to reach out to her friend, didn't care, got distracted, whatever else. And it's like, I think that was like a great thing. It's said all the time, people grieve in different ways, but that was a perfect example of people, we'll say that, we don't mean it. Like, we want people to play these roles. It's the expectation. The expectation of how a funeral's gonna go, how a wake's gonna go. People are gonna eat, people are gonna drink, we're gonna toast, we're gonna share stories, we're gonna cry, there you go. I think that was like a great commentary on that.
I just think that there was more of her pressuring herself than anyone else. No one seemed to care that she wasn't crying. I think it's less about the pressure that's around us and the pressure that we feel, that when we have to grieve a certain way. And I think what he was saying before, the first comment, was just everybody grieves in different ways and you don't necessarily have to react in one way. And I think she was sad, she just didn't know how to show it.